Children of I want to talk to your manager parents. What has been your most embarrassing experience? I might be late, but my dad once asked the guy at the Verizon wireless store to give him his own social security number because he asked for my dad's. My dad walked out afterwards with some stranger's SS number on a post-it. I was a silent bystander because I really wanted my first phone. My mom has been this person regularly throughout my life, but I do have one positive story with it. She and I went to eat at Portillo's when I was a teenager, and we sat in the back of the restaurant where it was more private so we can eat in peace. About 10 minutes into our meal, two people come into the empty area and sit down 2 tables away from us. Turns out it was a manager and an employee that was getting written up. The manager was being a complete shat towards the employee, criticizing and belittling them. My mom put down her food and walked over and started yelling at the manager for being such an asshole. She went on a rant about how rude and wrong it was of him to do this in front of the public 2 tables away from customers and really let him have it. She demanded the phone number of the manager above him, and we left after she received it. I was pretty embarrassed at the time, but as I got older I realized that she was standing up for that employee and how wrong that manager really was. I'm not 100% sure what she did with that phone number because I lived with my dad and I had to go home after that meal. My mother did this in restaurants non-stop growing up. She would demand to see the manager because my burger, which I asked for medium, had some pink in it. Right, so my mum and me went shopping, and she dropped a melon on the way out. She then claimed it was bruised and demanded a full refund. When she refused, she shouted at customer service and demanded the manager. I just sat there with a kill me now expression on my face. After, one of the customer service employees gave me a chocolate bar, so 7-year me was happy. I was with my parents on vacation and the hotel put charges on the bill by accident. My mom marched to the front desk and demanded to see the manager. There was a long line, but she cut right in front of it. The manager wasn't very helpful, probably because she was rude. So my mom went to all the other customers in line and told them that the hotel was a scam and they were ripping us off with fake charges. She made a scene. The hotel called the police and we were escorted off the premises by actual cops. I died inside. We traveled a lot when we were younger and would skip lines at the airport since we were kids. But now we were all in our early teens and my mom faked having a heart condition to skip the long line to get on the airplane. Flight attendant would have none of it and told us to go back to the end of the line. I still remember the smiles and looks of everyone there. My mother is a nightmare with customer service. Even with the fact that her daughter works in customer service and deals with people like her on the daily. So many incidents stick out in my mind, but one that really embarrassed me was we were at Walmart. The stocker was struggling and dropped their price scanner thing on the ground. I was going to go help her gather her things she was struggling with when my mom came out like a bat out of hell and yelled, "You know you should pick that up, people could trip," and then she darted off with a cart. I was so embarrassed I just walked away in shame. And when I pointed it out to my mom, the girl dropped it on accident. She said, "Well, she should be more careful." K. About once a month my dad gets drunk and calls various customer service centers demanding stuff. Once he finally gets off the phone, frequently 45+ minutes later, he spends the next few days telling us all about how he slew the customer service dragon and boy, people sure don't appreciate their customers nowadays, blah blah blah. No duh, Dad, you're being an asshole. No one appreciates that. If you've worked for DirecTV customer service anytime since 1996, I apologize on behalf of my dad. Edit another story for y'all. I also remembered one time MCD's was having some kind of 2-for-1 breakfast sandwich deal going on where the total was about $3. He gets his breakfast, drives 25 minutes to work, realizes he is missing one of the sandwiches, and proceeds to call MCD's customer support every evening after work for a week to complain about his wasted $1.50. They gave him apologies. They gave him coupons, but he just wanted to yell. My mum demanded to see a CAF registered sinus hygiene certificate when she saw an employee go from cutting cake in the kitchen to handling money at the till, even though the real problem is going the other way. My father consistently returns food to grocery stores when he isn't satisfied with the quality. The worst is when he returns the 2-pound bricks of cheddar cheese because they went moldy before they should have. When I was a young child on a long distance flight, my mother let me and my brother sleep on the floor. For safety reasons, the flight attendants told my mother that we were not allowed to sleep on the floor. She started to argue with the flight attendants, who then turned to the pilots. The pilots threatened to turn the plane around unless we get up from the floor, but she continued to argue. The pilots announced they were about to turn around because of my mother. So all the passengers got pissed. Eventually she caved in when she had all passengers and flight crew on a Boeing 747 against her. Not the child, but I think this fits. I had this awful, annoying, terrible neighbor who, because I'm a giant sucker, I was kind to. She asked me to come with her to dinner because it was her birthday, and I knew I was the only person on the planet who would go with her, and gosh darn it, it's her birthday, how could I say no? So she and I went and we brought our kids, all girls. One mine, two hers. She makes her oldest do her math homework right there at the table. When the child asks her for help, mind you this is like 3rd grade math, the mom says it's too hard. I end up helping. The waiter is just fine. He comes by and takes our orders. She is already acting weird, but she always acted weird, so I didn't think much of it. Waiter comes by again and asks if we need anything. She dismisses him and waves him off and tells him no. Then like 30 seconds later turns to me and is like, can you believe how awful the waiter is? He won't even refill my drink. And just goes on about all these issues that literally don't exist. I'm like, he just asked if you needed anything. She cuts me off. I'm going to talk to the manager. Oh god. She talks to the manager like this is the worst experience she's ever had in the history of her miserable existence. I'm in shock. Her kids are their heads down. Mine is oblivious. Lol. The manager gives her like half off the meal. Oh, and the kicker? That's my half, so you only need to pay the rest. Oh gee, thanks. I left a big tip and a note on my receipt telling them the waiter was great and apologizing for the complaints that were totally not warranted. It was the second most embarrassing restaurant experience of my life. Before Value Village, Savers in the States I think, changed policies. She would cut tags to get discounts since the cashiers would basically make up whatever price they thought it would be on the spot. If they highballed it, she would get a manager involved, and I hated that. When I was 6, my mom took my brothers and I out to Golden Corral for dinner. She went up to the buffet, got a steak, and came back to the table. She's an avid A1 steak sauce fan and cannot, I repeat, cannot eat steak without it. She poured out the A1 onto her plate, tasted it, and was instantly horrified. She proceeded to pour out the Golden Corral steak sauce right next to the A1 and it matched perfectly. Outraged, she called over a waitress and eventually the manager, showing them her little experiment and how she exposed the great steak sauce fraud of 06. My brothers and I were scarred for the rest of our lives. I still have nightmares about it. I worked at Best Buy. I stopped in with my mom one day because she wanted to buy me the Star Wars DVD box set for my birthday. I had a huge crush on the girl that was working the customer service counter. Well, the DVD set rang up $10 more than it was priced, and my mom deliberately didn't say anything until after the transaction so she could claim the effing $5 Michigan scan law bounty. My crush didn't know how to process it and the manager was busy, so my mom tore into her about how it was her job and how she should understand how to do things at my job. To a girl I liked. My life was misery for a while afterward. RIP my inbox. No, I never got the courage up to ask her out and she left the store afterwards. My grandmother wasn't only a let me talk to your manager type, she was a racist, and advancing dementia completely turned off her filter for that. I've blocked out all the context behind it other than I took her to buy yarn and something went wrong. I think maybe they shorted her a couple bucks or wouldn't honor a coupon or something. Whatever it was ended in a let me talk to your manager followed by a tirade to the manager about how they shouldn't be hiring Mexicans. I just remember having to talk over her and say, oh my god, you can't talk to her like that. Nothing you just said is okay, followed by me trying to push a wheelchair out of the store as fast as possible with her digging her feet into the ground trying to get me to stop so she could go back to trying to ruin someone's day, and me wondering if I'd go to jail for elder abuse if her ankles snapped in the process because nothing was going to stop me getting her out of that store. I got her into the car and then went back in and apologized till I was blue in the face. I wish I could say it was an isolated incident, but it definitely wasn't. If by any cosmic chance any sales clerks or phone reps that had to deal with my grandmother read this thread, I am so incredibly sorry. I apologize on behalf of my whole family, and I'd give you a hug if I could. As an interesting side effect of caring for her, I have a tendency to wander off and pretend to look at things when we get to the register if I'm with someone and I'm not the one paying. I think she gave me an honest to God phobia. Edit. Thanks for the helpful suggestions about pulling the wheelchair backward next time. She passed away 2 years ago, so it's thankfully something I won't have to deal with for a while. I'd never experienced someone digging their heels in before, and I was sort of panicking trying to get her out of the store before she tried anything else. I think under any kind of better circumstances I would have worked it out. Edit 2 bonus story edition. This one thankfully happened at home, but is nevertheless I guess equal parts amusing and equally awful as the other story in hindsight. It was some kind of special occasion. Probably one of our birthdays, because we were all sitting at the kitchen table eating cake. The nightly routine was we all sit down to eat dinner, and she'd put the TV on the evening news, which we'd halfway listen to. They were talking about something political and said blah blah blah, and the House Judicial Committee approved this. My grandmother caught that one line and said, "The Judicial Committee? Those damn Jews. What are they doing with all these committees?" I got caught somewhere between wanting to laugh at her misunderstanding and wanting to make some kind of noise of horror, and instead I just inhaled sharply and aspirated a gigantic mouthful of chocolate cake and coughed so hard and so long that my mom wound up having to take me to urgent care because it set off my asthma. Good times, y'all. Good times. My mom used to run restaurants. My stepfather used to be a chef in high-end restaurants and is the kind of guy who expects to be treated better than he is currently being treated, regardless of whatever that treatment is. They are not fun to go out to eat with. The most embarrassing experience is actually their most embarrassing experience. One where I embarrassed them. My wife and I pride ourselves on being a relief table when we go out to eat. Both of us have been servers. And there's always the counterpoint to the difficult table. That's us. Barring horrible service or bad food, we are super easy customers, tip well, and try to have a good time with our server. Furthermore, we just treat people nicely. So you can imagine our disdain when my parents act like they're ducking royalty at a dinner service. My wife and I went out to dinner with them. They were being particularly tough. My mom was acting like she was Gordon Ramsay analyzing the business. Critiquing everything down to the amount of bubbles in her seltzer. Looks like it's time to change the CO2. My stepdad was getting more and more heated over stupid things like the amount of ice in his drink and how the waitress didn't top off his water that he was barely sipping on fast enough. It came to a head when my stepfather ordered a steak medium well. It came back medium well. And for some reason he changed his mind that he wanted it medium rare while it was cooking, and they didn't read his mind. So he gave attitude. As did my mom. They jumped really quickly to demanding free stuff. I'm an adult and this may be the first time they realized this. Interrupted in front of the server and said something like, "Really? This is what you're doing? That's what you ordered?" I turned to the server and said, "We do not need anything calmed." I then pulled out my wallet and handed her my card and said, "This is for the bill. We'll happily wrap up with what we have here. I'm very sorry for their behavior. You're doing great." Then the line that stung them so deep they still bring it up years later. I was taught to treat people nicely. A lesson that seems to be forgotten. Thank you. They turned red. The server walked away. I looked down and cut my steak and didn't say a word. They were so flabbergasted that the meal was virtually silent except me asking my stepfather how his steak was a few minutes later. I signed the check, gave a big tip, and we walked out and said goodbyes. They've been nicer to servers each time that we've gone out since. Edit. Wow. First gold. Thanks. I don't like going to restaurants with her. She thinks that because she worked as a waitress for a year 35 years ago, it gives her the right to act like a complete arsehole to them. She also thinks not tipping them will encourage them to get their act together. Joke's on you, mom. I always find our server after seated. Give them a $20 and apologize in advance for your poor behavior. Edit. Yes. She knows what I think of it. She doesn't care. She believes she's sticking to her principles. And that tipping poor service, read, never had good service. Something will always be wrong. will encourage thigh laziness. It's not going to stop if you wait on her. I'm very sorry. Edit 2. She waited tables at a Pizza Hut when she was 20. She looks back at her time through rose-colored glasses. I worked hard, went above and beyond to get my tips, then she yells at the waitress for trying to refill her drinks. Excuse me, did I ask for a refill? Obviously logic and empathy are not her strong points. My dad just loved to argue, and he loved a deal. We were shopping in a department store, and I found a pair of pants I was mildly interested in. The pants were tagged at, let's say, $40, and the sign on the rack was all pants $25. I was mildly interested. I asked the sales clerk if they had them in my size. The clerk said those aren't supposed to be on that rack. My dad lost his it and insisted on getting the pants for $25 and started asking for a courtesy discount on top of that. Escalated to the floor manager and the store manager. Meanwhile, I didn't want the pants. They were okay pants, I guess. Nothing awesome. I just didn't care very much about them. I was more than happy to move on. I told my dad I didn't want the pants. By then he didn't care about what I wanted. He wanted the pants at the better price. Eventually, after like an hour of arguing, the store manager said, we're not giving you the pants at that price. Take them or leave them at $40. So we left them, which suited me just fine because I didn't want the pants. One time I was in a record store with my dad. He bought a record that was 19.99 euros. He paid using a €20 bill. The clerk took the money and put it in the register and gave my dad the CD in a plastic bag. I started walking off when I noticed my dad wasn't moving. As I turn around, I hear him say to the record store clerk, you still have to give me my cent back. The clerk replies that they don't return 1 or 2 cents because they don't accept them and as such don't have them in the store. My dad replies by saying that is judicially impossible and asks for the manager. To make a long story short, one of the clerks gave my dad a cent from his own wallet. Scene. Any fast food drive-through. Worker. Mom, can you please drive forward a little bit while your food finishes up? Mom, no. Folds arms. My mom asked me to call her a taxi via an app. She ended up calling me multiple times complaining about how the driver didn't use the route she thought was best. She never owned a car and doesn't know how to drive, even though the guy just used the best possible route the navigator suggested. She ended up getting out halfway and using Subway. The driver proceeded to call me in tears, completely shocked, unsure of what he did so wrong, and apologizing. I felt like total it. I never called her a cab again. Edit. First silver thank you. My mom needed to return some shirts at the mall because they didn't fit right. It was past the allotted time that she had to return them, so the employee said that there wasn't anything she could do. My mom started screaming at this girl who was probably about 16 or 17, calling her names and demanding to speak to the manager. When the manager told my mom that they couldn't do anything and that the return policy was on the receipt, my mom threw a fit and knocked over a display that was next to the register and stormed out of the store. I was probably 6 or 7 at the time and I was mortified. I apologized for her behavior and picked up what I could before she started calling for me to follow her. The manager was super sweet to me though and told me that I was a good kid and to stick up to my mom when I could get away with it. This is a weird story that had a huge impact on me and about a parent talking to the manager, but is a little different. Growing up, my dad was sheriff of a small town. I must have been around 8-9. He was brought in after the previous sheriff was booted out for political reasons, stealing city funds. That was a really unpopular movie, since he was super popular and spread his money all over town and let people get away with murder. That sheriff was out and my dad was brought in. Everybody hated him, in part because they loved the old sheriff and also because my dad was an outsider even though he came from about 2 towns over. He wasn't of their world, so he could never be fit to see over the village. It didn't help that my dad was a raging asshole with a stick up his butt for the rules. One day, my dad was dressed in his full uniform and took me alone to the local corner diner, like one of those places straight out of Roadhouse. We sat down and ate the full dinner, and my dad lectured me something about respect and the rules are all we have. Then the waitress came in and dropped the check. My dad looked at it, and it said the meal was free. My dad then excused himself and went up to the waitress. I kept to myself and doodled on the napkin, and the next time I looked up, my dad was full on screaming at the woman. He was straight up shaking. She tried to explain that free meals is how all cops are treated in this town. And my dad was furious that he would get special treatment, that police are put above the normal laws, that the police have rules they must follow, and not accepting kickbacks is one of those rules, and that it especially happened in front of his kid, who he's trying to teach right. Everyone in the diner was quiet and just staring at him. It was a weird situation because it was a moment where my dad showed a lot of integrity, but also a story of a 6 feet 7 inches man with a gun on his belt screaming at a tiny little waitress. It stuck in my head as a clear picture of the contradictions that our parents are. Like, a lot of the good comes from them, but at the same time a lot of the bad. Edit. This kind of blew up more than I was expecting. So I would like to promote not being an arsehole cop who beats your kids. Edit. Quit sending messages telling me how itty my dad was. He's not a hero and did some really itty things in his life. But I'm still his son, and it's not fun to hear from a bunch of strangers tell me how my dad sucks. You didn't know him. You don't know his full story. You just know a slice of life told by one person. The point of this story is that people are complicated and that we're full of contradictions. It's not to give yourself another excuse to feel good about yourself on the internet. He was a guy who beat me and my brother, had anger issues, was painfully insecure and closed off, but also was a noteworthy cop. He rose through the ranks and as a white man, brought progressive racial policies to his department in the 1980s that to this day are still radical. He was an innovator as a police administrator. I'll put it like this. He did heartbreaking things to me, and yet I found room to forgive him. Through a long and painful process, I found room to forgive him as an adult, not excuse his behavior, but put peace in my heart towards my feelings towards him. Whatever opinion you have of him, keep in mind that from your computer, it is one that is really easy for you to have. And for me it is and will always be a really difficult one for me to have. I was 13 when this happened. My mom had made a reservation at a hotel for a trip. But when she got there, the lady said there was some error with the reservation and that my mom's payment didn't go through. So the lady offered us a double bedroom for a discount, rather than just taking the room, thanking the lady, and leaving. My mom decided the best course of action would be to scream in the middle of a hotel lobby, "Nobody is going anywhere till I get my duck-eyeing room." She then proceeded to pester the lady, who clearly couldn't do anything about it, until eventually she called the police on my mom for public disturbance. Mortifying. My mom is truly a Karen. Going out to eat with her is always a nightmare. Her orders have 14 special requests, but she's not at all kind about it. She is defensive from the get-go, like you're an idiot who's already screwed the order up. No dressing. Not on the side. Nothing. Completely dry. Do you understand? I will send it back. The one I will never forget though was dinner at Joe's Crab Shack. In case you've never been, it's one of those places that every so often plays a song that the entire staff is required to drop everything and do a little synchronized dance to. It's quick. Everyone gets a little kick out of it. It's part of the fun. Now my Mil Karen knew this. It's not like she'd never been here, but apparently she was not willing to wait 2 extra minutes for her dry salad. So she starts going off as soon as the dancing starts. She gets a manager, who clearly knows Karen well and offers a quick apology for doing their job, a discount and her dry ass salad. But Karen's not completely satisfied. She tells us that even though dinner for our party of 8 is on her, she's not tipping the waitress 1 penny. She proceeds to itch loudly the rest of the meal and antagonize our waitress over petty it. I worked too many years in customer service and yeah, no, I'm a decent human being. I made sure to get my bills separate so I could tip for the entire table. I wrote a quick note on the receipt, something along the lines of way to stay positive even when the customer's a jerk. I was a little afraid of the wrath of Karen. It was one of my first interactions with her too. But when the waitress came and hugged me, Karen and I locked eyes. She knew I didn't care. Don't be a cunt, Karen. Not my parent but a grandparent. When I was around 10 years old, my grandmother went out and got us, her, my brother, and me, McDonald's. We got home and we didn't have napkins in the bags. No big deal, right? We have paper towels and napkins in the house. Also, me and my brother are pretty good with not making any messes while we eat. Nope. Grandmother got us in the car, drove back to McDonald's, demanded a manager, and screeched about how upset she was that we didn't get any napkins. I wanted to just melt into the floor and disappear. It's just napkins. Nanny. Edit. Changed wording a little bit. Ugh. My dad. He can be such a prick if you get his order wrong. It could be fast food or a nice sit-down restaurant. He often yells at waitstaff if they undercook his steak. It has to be well done or he claims to have lost his appetite. One time we went to Burger King when I was younger and we sat down to eat. He took one bite of his burger, spit it out and immediately started itching about it being undercooked. He cut in front of everyone and lined to yell at the cashier. Then he asked who was the cook. When the cook appeared, he launched his burger, hitting the poor kid directly in the face with a lidless burger. He's now banned for life from Burger King. My dad would sometimes do this at restaurants if the server was too slow or the food was wrong, especially multiple times in the same meal. He was totally right in being frustrated, because sometimes this was extreme. But we all hated it. The worst time was when we were in our favorite restaurant. My mom literally said, "I'm not doing this," and gathered up us 3 kids and we went to the car. Edit. You guys seem to have gotten the wrong impression. My dad was not a D to anyone and he did this a few times a year at worst. The incidents I remember warranted him speaking with the manager and he was never rude or insulting. The rest of us just didn't care enough about bad service to say anything to anyone. We got screwed once in a Taco Bell drive-thru, not the usual way, which sent my mom into a complete meltdown. And the people running the place had, I kid you not, run out of lettuce. And I've never dealt with dumber people. Instead of just telling people they were out and letting it go, they were being idiots and saying there'll be a small delay. And it was a super hot day. The AC was broke. We're exhausted. All we really want is some water. But we're stuck in the drive-thru line waiting as they try to figure out how to make lettuce out of thin air. You'd think there'd be another bag somewhere or something, but maybe that was too complicated for them. And so, 20 minutes into sitting cooking in the car, trapped between other cars in the drive-thru and unable to go forward or back or even sideways. Speaker and signs. Even if we wanted to jump the curb. And my mother is just cursing up a blue streak about the stupidity of the people involved. Screaming her damn head off about just ducking make some lettuce-free tacos, you dumb its. What do you use for brains? The fetid remains of your blasted out assholes. I remember much of this very vividly as I was about 12 or 13 at the time. And I was learning all sorts of new words and phrases. My little brother took notes. And that's when we see some Taco Bell teenage idiot employee boy make a break from the building and go sprinting across the parking lot over towards the grocery store across the way. They sent out a duckhead to go buy some lettuce. And the cursing rises a few notches. Nobody cares about the ducking lettuce. Jesus ducking Christ, just let us out of here, you little. etc. Volume. Variety. Viciousness. Mom hits all the good verses. And 45 minutes or so after we got into this, the car at the window, a couple ahead of us, which is probably the real villain of the story. Why wouldn't they duck and leave without lettuce? WTF. Finally gets handed something, and they don't leave immediately. They have to ducking talk for a while before they drive off. My mom is a volcano past its sell-by date and just frothing at the mouth now. But eventually, they pull off and leave and we can pull up to the window. And what I've left out of this story is, my family, for a few years, would participate in parades as clowns, handing out candy to the kids at the side of the road and dancing our way through the parade route to the rocking tune of Celebrate Good Time Tonight, on repeat. And this day was one of those days. We were all in full costume, makeup, super baggy rainbow pants, rainbow wig, big flower on the suspenders, big ole ridiculous shoes, the whole deal. And so the car finally pulls away ahead of us, and my mom, who for the last hour has been a spitting bulldog of bile and vindictive rage and a constant criticizer of the drive-thru window people's ancestry and breeding, realizes she has to pull up and face them in full clown regalia to get our stupid tacos. And I remember that moment when mom realized it. The mix of anger, embarrassment, ridiculousness of it, and eventually the humor of the whole situation went through her and she started laughing so hard she was crying. And when the people behind us started honking for us to just go, they'd been waiting too. It just got funnier somehow. And so now mom is not just a crazy angry lady, she's a crazy angry clown lady. And more than that, she's a crazy clown lady who's been sweating and now crying too. So she's not even a crazy clown lady with good makeup anymore. She's just a wreck of a crazy clown lady, which makes her laugh even harder. My brother and I thought she was going to die. I mean, she couldn't breathe. And those outfits, the heat, hell, the whole reason we pulled into this place was we needed water. And to give mom credit, she didn't just squeal out of there flipping everyone the bird. She got herself together, pulled up to the window, looked up at the girl through the car window with her ruined clown makeup and big rainbow wig, and handed her the money very calmly, said thank you and took the bag. And we drove off. And I hope to hell they remember us. I know I'll never forget the look on the drive-through girl's face as we drove up and she started to try to apologize for the delay and just stopped staring at us. And good day.